They have to answer Colin Kaepernick football next week. But in the meantime, it is baseball, and more baseball. This guy loves the grand old game, probably more than I did, and I spent 30 nights at 30 ballparks, including his favorite place of St. Louis, Missouri. He is a lifer Cardinals fan. He's now the senior editor at Sports on Earth. You may remember him as one of the founding editors of Deadspin so many years ago. He's older than that now, living in Athens, Georgia, and you can follow him out on Twitter at William F. Leach. That's Leitch. One of our defending champions and one of our absolute favorites to have on. Will, welcome back, man. It's been taking me a couple weeks to track you down, but you wrote that Orioles piece a couple of weeks ago. I called you back here after the trading deadline to say, how did that go for you?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Thanks for having me. I always feel like every time I talk with you, we're talking about something bad that the Orioles have done or are about to do or will be doing someday in the near future.
Well, that is the story of 25 and a half years on the radio here in Baltimore. That's my life.
It's hard to avoid it.
Well, look, you wrote a piece. I want to pull it up here. It was on Sports on Earth. It was filed on July 17. So, you sort of gave him a 2-week warning, like a 2-minute warning in football. And, I shared this piece and shared some kind words for you. But in the midst of it, I was releasing all of these chapters of the Peter Principles of the Mike Messina situation and the Albert Bell situation and Sid Thrift and Confederate money and the fans going away from Camden Yards. And, there would be another dozen years of losing even after Albert Bell's hit blew out. But then, this period of winning, and I said it all throughout this. It's a tribute to Buck. It's a tribute to Andy McPhail. It's a tribute to Adam Jones and Chris Tillman and Chris Davis and lots of guys that either created their careers or resurrected them here, including Buck. But it deodorized the ownership in such a way that people would come up to me, and this is in my best Tim Kirchin Baltimore accent, which I do pretty well, Will. Peter Angelos, he ain't got nothing to do with the team no more. He ain't even around here no more. He don't call the shots no more. Dan Duquette's calling the shots. That's pretty good, Will. But I think I know, we all sort of know better, and I think at 4 o'clock on Monday we learned that, right?
Yeah, I think it certainly confirmed it if it wasn't surely known completely already. Yeah, it's just, this is the time of year. I wrote about a week before the trade deadline. I mentioned that this is the time of year where you want to either go 7-0 or 0-7, so you know for sure where you stand. So, because this is the time we have to make the decisions. Are you a buyer? Are you a seller? Are you going to kind of ride the fence a little bit? And it does seem like in any sort of rational world, and I say this out of respect for what the Orioles have done the last few years, and certainly what Buck Showalter's been able to put together, and for them to outperform a lot of the projections, I think it's been a point of pride for the team, and I think a lot of their fans for a long time. But the idea that somehow this team was going to pull it together, late, and even when you could squint a little bit and say, okay, well, the wild card's kind of tight, no one's pulling away, then the Royals get hot and they start to pull away. Now the Yankees have bought and so on. The Orioles have so many teams to catch that it feels like the smart move would be to sell. However, give them the benefit of the doubt and say, okay, this is still a team. They got a lot of pride. Maybe they can pull something together. Machado's been hitting a little better. Maybe the lines can hang in. Maybe you just let it ride a little bit and you don't go sell. But certainly the idea of buying and then buying in kind of this strange way where you bring in kind of these bit pieces, I don't know. I often feel, and you obviously are an expert in Angelos, it often feels sometimes that the moves seem to be guided by some sort of to pretend to like impress or convince some mythical fan that we're going for it. And I think the problem with that is A, it's a mistake, but B, also I think it insults the intelligence. Like Orioles fans are not dumb. They've watched this team. They've seen this rotation. I think there's reasons. There's been some good things on this team this year and things to get excited about. But the idea that they're going to be able to make a run by trading for Beckham and Hellickson, I think is an odd one, particularly when you've got Britton, and Britton is just, even with some of his slowing down a little bit, still Zach Britton. There's a lot of stuff you can get for him. Maybe you're not getting the Andrew Miller deal from last year, but you're getting something. You're getting something that I think can help them build to the future. And I think that is kind of speaks to the Angelos principle, the Peter principle, if you will, this notion that you're not going to sell and you're not going to You're not going to like build for the future. You're just going to always trying to convince yourself and your fans that success is just around the corner. Here it comes. And I think fans are smarter than that now. And I think I wonder if now that it's very clear that, this is not who is back in charge and really who has really been in charge all along, if you'll see some greater backlash now that people have realized, wow, this little window that we had of this little, particularly very good era in Orioles history, that window is starting to close, and we really don't have much to show for it.
Well, and the real empty pockets come when Machado leaves in 18 months and you get nothing. Mm-hmm. Certainly for next year, to think that they're going to go out in the offseason and get 3 pitchers, which is what they need. They don't need one, and Hellickson won't be one of them either. They need 3 real pitchers. Will, it's kind of unprecedented to be running pitchers with 6 and 7 ERAs out to pitch in August. Like, not many franchises in the history of Major League Baseball have done that, because if your ERA is 6 or 7, they've always got somebody at AA or AAA that they'd rather give 40 or 50 innings to let them come up and figure out if they can have an ERA of 4 or 5, right?
Yeah, it's certainly strange. It's strange to find, a team that loses 105 games to put out pitchers that throw 6 ERAs, let alone a team that is buying at the trade deadline. It's certainly unusual. And it's funny you brought up Machado, and obviously this is the big question, and really has been a big question for the last year or so, and certainly more urgent this year, is what are the Orioles going to do with Machado? And obviously, with the history of Messina and the history of, the Orioles not always kind of keeping their guys. It's funny how much this year you've already kind of, because Machado struggled a little bit, you wonder how much of this, and again, you would know this better than me, but you wonder how much of this comes from kind of the Angelo side, where all of a sudden you start hearing rumors about Machado, like, I don't know, maybe he doesn't want to be here. Try to paint him as like the bad guy a little bit, as opposed to what this really is, which is, if you want to keep Manny Machado, you can pay him. And then I think you're already kind of seeing this push to make him into, we just can't sign him. Like, our hands are tied. We can't sign him, and maybe he doesn't want to be here anyway, when the fact is, if you give him the most money, he'll stay. And I think this has always been kind of the myth of Angelos, is this idea that like, we just can't do it. Like, the Yankees are always going to outbid us, or someone's going to outbid us. If they want, they have not shown, I don't remember the last time they even talked to his representatives. Like, the idea that and if that's fine. Listen,
well, it's harder to do when he's hitting 218. Will, I mean, they counted on a lot of things. They weren't counting on Machado to stink this year, and he has.
Yeah, so I think he's certainly underperformed, but I guarantee you the rest of baseball is not concerned. It's probably the best way to put that.
Well, I mean, that's all the more reason to think you could have dealt him last week and really brought in a haul in the way that the Yankees conditioned their fans last year to raise a white flag and say, we're going to be better. And, of course, if you're Angelos or you're Sean Spicer or Scaramucci, for crying out loud, you could at least point to it and say, hey, look at what the Yankees did. We're just following that new way of sort of selling off guys before they leave. And, I don't think anyone here believes there's even a 10% chance that Manny Machado is going to be playing baseball here in 2019. And I don't know that anybody really believes that the Orioles are going to be a factor in the American League race next year, with the Yankees and the Red Sox getting better. And look, the Yankees got better for next year on Monday too, right?
Yeah, I think that's got to be what's really frustrating. Is not only you not contending this year, but the Yankees are like, they are not going away. They're building something that's going to be around for a long time. And of course, the Red Sox are always going to be a problem, and Tampa Bay is always hanging around being kind of annoying. And the thing that these 3 franchises have in common that the Orioles do not have is they have a plan. They have a plan in place, and they don't seem to be responding to whatever the PR disaster of the moment is, or just trying to convince themselves of something that might not be the case. And you're exactly right. The thing that the Orioles need, particularly as much as the farm system has struggled and as much as this team is getting older, the thing they need more than anything else is to bring in, to make a fundamental Herschel Walker type trade. It's what they need.
Well, that's what made them what they were. I mean, the Adam Jones, Chris Stillman,
exactly.
That is what changed everything here for them. It deodorized the place.
And there's frankly, I don't see any route to this happening that doesn't involve trading Machado in the offseason. Obviously, it's too late now. I understand at the deadline it's difficult because that's a massive trade. Like, to trade Machado signifies a major shift, dramatic shift in the direction of the franchise that I think the Orioles probably need to do. But sometimes that's hard to do when you're convincing yourself you're in a pennant chase. The real question is, are they going to do it this off season? Like, sure, they probably would have got a little bit more if they had done it now. But I'll be nice. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that, like, Manny Machado is a very difficult guy to trade the deadline, even if you want to, just because it's so hard to get. He's like, even in a year where he's hadn't bet in the 218, he was a fundamentally game-changing player to get at the deadline. I mean, look what happened at the deadline.
Well, the Red Sox had a need at that position, though. Keep that in mind.
Yeah, but they also have every single time he steps on the field at Fenway Park, everybody loses their mind. So you wonder if they even considered that an option. So, but to me, that's the thing is, when you look at the market, like look at the trade market. Hardly any position players and sluggers changed place at all. It was all starters and it was all relievers. The market for, like, my Cardinals, for example, they would have loved to have make a trade for a big bat, but they just weren't out there. The market was not valuing him. Look at what J.D. Martinez. Again, he's a free agent at the end of this year, but he's a good hitter, and the Tigers got hardly anything for him at all. So I can understand the Orioles not doing it now. However, when in the off season, when teams are saying, we're going to go for it this year, we need that big bat in the middle, that's when you kind of have to make that decision. And so I understand why they didn't trade Machado now. To me, the larger issue is, why are you buying? Like, why are you buying? What are you trying to prove? What are you trying to convince yourself of? And particularly when you look what the market would, again, getting back to Britain, what the market for Britain would have been, it would have been they would have gotten something that would be an excellent little start. Look how much the Yankees changed their entire farm system last year with 2 trades. The Orioles could have done maybe not that well, but something pretty close, simply by trading Britton now and Machado in the offseason.
Well, then they have Brock and they have Adam Jones, both going to be up next year. But Will Leitch joining us here, longtime writer of all things sports. He's at Sports on Earth right now, senior writer there. You can follow him out on Twitter at William F. Leitch, Leitch, and of course the founding editor of Deadspin many years ago, and lifer Cardinals fan. The bigger picture here isn't just Angelos, who, if he were in some way this sympathetic figure who was 88 years old, who said, you know what, I don't have a lot of years left. I want to buy a couple of pitchers. I want to chase this last wild card spot and be that little engine Royals thing that could from a couple of years ago and shock the world. I might even hear that if he were the sympathetic figure saying, I might not have till 2020. But the other part of this is that big picture of strategy of where is the big strategy? Or kind of sort of like what's going on down at Pennsylvania Avenue right now. What are we really trying to do here? And what you're really trying to do here, if you're an Orioles fan and you're a wise one, is figure out what's Buck Showalter's future here. What's the future of Dan Duquette, who apparently is incredibly disgruntled and doesn't really want this job. He tried to get the Toronto job a couple of years ago and was literally forced to stay, which I can't think of a baseball precedent where the guy who was running the show wanted to leave and the owner demanded that he stay. And then on top of that, you got Brady Anderson sniffing around here as the family Bannon, and he's sort of all omnipresent in some way, as was reported by Ken Rosenthal, almost brazenly in the offseason. Like I know you caught that piece, but it's almost like they're sort of proud of the fact that he doesn't really have a role. I don't know how all that's going to sit, but I do know Buck Showalter can get a job probably just about anywhere at the end of next year if his contract runs up, and I'm sure Dan Duquette would be happy to go do something somewhere else, because none of these guys don't seem like they're going to be signing on for another 3 to 5 years, and if they were, this would be a time to do that, right?
Yeah, to me, Showalter is the tell. I don't know why a manager of Showalter's intellect and reputation and just general acumen would want anything more to do with this after next year. I mean, clearly there's a storm coming, And listen, you take away Showalter, and imagine, again, to go back to my Cardinals, imagine if Mike Matheny is managing the Orioles the last few years. This wouldn't even be a discussion, because it would have felt like the last 20 years. Because I think Showalter just made such a difference with this team. And if he decides that this is a mess, I don't want anything to do with this, and this team, particularly like you lose Machado, and your team's getting older, and and the rest of the division is moving forward. I mean, he'd be a fool not to look around, or just say, forget it. I'm getting older. I'll go. He was good on television before he was on before he came to Baltimore. I think that I just doesn't seem like a situation where he'd want to mess with. And even if he was like, if he wanted to stay managing, the number of people that would be lining up at his door to hire him in a second would be substantial. So yeah, I think that it's this little run of success. You touched on this earlier, and I thought it was really smart. This run of success has given this illusion that everything is fine and everything was better now and everything was different now. And I think a large part of that, frankly, was Buck Showalter. And I think that now that that's starting to break down a little bit, and now that you're starting to see that familiar Baltimore fan anger coming out, I don't know why Showalter would want anything to do with it. And if he leaves, then everything really starts to fall apart pretty fast. Let's not forget, I think you can make some arguments, some good moves and some bad moves, but let's not forget, one of the reasons he got this job in the first place, because not a lot of people wanted it. Not a lot of people wanted to work for Angelos. I think he's done as well as you could expect, kind of under those circumstances. But if Showalter leaves and this thing starts to collapse, you'll wonder who is going to want to be involved in kind of the rebuild of this when you've got a guy that's shown that he's not necessarily going to give freedom to the front office of his team that a lot of other teams will.
I would like to say you were like Nostradamus 2 weeks ago when you predicted this, but, prescient at the very least. He's Will Leach from Sports on Earth. You can read the piece. Orioles could be at crossroads. He wrote the piece July 17th. I tried tracking him down to come on and do some radio. We crisscrossed. I went out of the country, and I said, just wait till the trading deadline. You'll look even smarter after that. So, it's funny on this picture that you have on Sports on Earth. It's Machado elbow bumping Scope, and we're now at that point with Scope where if they're serious about him, they better get the cash register out for him right now, because he's one of those guys that's getting slippery here and becoming a bit of a $20 million baseball player all of a sudden, and I think the price of pokers goes up every time he does well. It's sort of weird, Will, because you talk about Machado and his trade value being down. It's almost like you root against him, right? Like, we'll sign him more on the cheap if he only hits 242 this year. In the case of Scope, he's, overproducing and looks like that guy and looks like the next guy in line that he's going to wind up being a very, very expensive baseball player at some point, and looks to be the kind of guy you'd want to wrap up. This would be the time to do that as well.
I mean, again, this depends on your contention window. I mean, yes, I agree. He looks like he's having a kind of a breakthrough year this year, but this baseball now, what really the Cubs and the Astros have done in the last 5 years is they've kind of really defined this idea of a contention window. And if you're not, it's very NBA, frankly, is you are either trying to win a championship you're trying to build toward a championship team, you have a championship team, or you are a long way, or you are not close enough to a championship to where you should stop pretending and start over. And to me, a guy like Scope is like, he would be an excellent guy to have on a team that was surrounded by more talent and contending. But if he's not, he becomes something that's not so much something helping you win as much as someone that, if you don't think this Orioles team is going to win a World Series in the next 2 or 3 years, and I find it hard to argue that they're going to, you're basically going to be paying. You're basically paying for what could be a post-peak period of him where he's not the player that he's been this year. There's still some holes in his game. There's still some contact issues. And he's been an excellent player, but is that something you want to bet on for the next 3 or 4 years when you are probably not going to be much of a contending team anyway? I think you need, in a way, you would look at what the White Sox are doing. The White Sox now are kind of the model. If you are not a World Series contending team, everything must go. And the advantage that the White Sox had that a team like say my Cardinals didn't have, the White Sox had like 5 or 6 really talented players surrounded by guys that were terrible. That's actually an excellent position to be in if you're looking to trade, because you can maximize the talent. As opposed to my Cardinals, who have about 24 pretty good players, but not guys you're going to get, no superstars, and not guys you're going to get a lot for in trade. To me, that's where you start thinking if you're going to shut it down, and if you're going to trade Machado, and if you're going to start looking around to trade some of these guys, Brock next year maybe, and some of these moves, even Jones, if it comes to that. If you start doing that, then you start looking at someone like Scope as someone who's got real value for another team. Now, I know it's weird to say because he's had this breakthrough year, and you're talking about how much you're going to pay him, and I'm like, no, you should trade him. But I think that when you look at what the Orioles kind of the window for the next couple of years, you think that maybe you don't think of him as someone that necessarily is going to help your team win a championship as much as he is an asset that will help you build for the future.
This is going to be an interesting, not just a race here, because, I think the race is going to be pretty good going down to the wire, especially in the American League with all these teams getting back involved in it now. But I don't see any sort of runaway champion here. I don't see any Golden State Warriors or any, as we're sitting here on the eve of the NFL season trying to figure out if the Patriots are only going to lose 1 or 2 games this year. But, the Dodgers have loaded up. Houston's loaded up. The Dodgers get Yu Darvish at the deadline on Monday. But, I'm not penciling anybody in for anything because I think the Cubs are a good team. I think the Nats are a good team. I know what the Royals have been made of. I think the Red Sox, the Yankees, these are all pretty good baseball teams. This is going to be a nice little round robin, whatever it comes down to in October this year.
Yeah, this is part of this is the nature of baseball. The best baseball team that I've seen in the last 20 years was the 2001 Seattle Mariners, who did not even make it to the World Series, let alone win it. When you look at the advantage that you have in the NBA and the NFL is dominant teams can be more dominant in that small sample size. And in a baseball series, I think Fangraphs did a study a few years ago. If you put the worst team in baseball against the best team in baseball in a 5-game series, the best team wins, I think, 66 to 67% of the time, which is, of course, the majority. But, that's also like a base hit for the other team to win. Like, there's a 33% chance of winning a series. Billy Beane famously said his bleep doesn't work in the playoffs. What you're seeing teams do now is to just build to do the best they can to get into the tournament, to just be good enough to get there. And that's the thing with the Dodgers. That's why they do a trade for Darvish, not because, I hope we can hold off the Diamondbacks. Like, they're already thinking of the division series and the championship series and potentially the World Series. The best thing you can do is give yourself the best starter in that spot. But these things, all it takes is Yu Darvish not feeling that good that day. And next thing you know, there was just a game last week where he gave up 10 runs. So, the idea that anything can happen when you get in the playoffs. So, to me, you look at the Dodgers, they're just stacked. It's funny to think just last year we were talking about the Cubs dynasty, and it lasted like 6 months until we decided, nope, now it's the Dodgers dynasty. And I think that's part of a little bit of what baseball is, And look at the Royals. The year the Royals went to the World Series and lost to the Giants, they barely made the playoffs. They barely won the wild card game. No one would really argue at all that they were one of the best teams in baseball, but they got hot at the right time. And I think that is really what the baseball postseason is about. Now, the bad side of that is it's hard to have a Golden State team, even if you really have a truly great one. The good side of that is it makes the postseason very exciting. And I think, you look at the NBA this year, a lot of people argued that was great. It was fun watching Golden State, but it made the playoffs themselves not that much fun because it almost felt preordained. They were just so much better than everyone else. I don't think that's going to be a problem in baseball this year.
When the Cubs ran away last year, every phone conversation I got into from July on was they better win game 1. They better win game 1. In baseball, you better win game 1, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing is think about this. Let's say the Dodgers win 115 games this year, and they end up playing the team that had the second wild card that wins the wild card game that won 87 games. Like that's a huge disparity. That's 27 games disparity between those two teams.
Yeah, they should be spotted 1.5 games in a 7-game series or something,
that's
right?
The thing. But they're not.
but they're not.
And that's the thing. And all it takes is that road team just getting hot in one, or just having one good game or one fluke play. Strange things happen in baseball all the time, and all it takes.
Steve Bartman got a ring this week. You know what I'm talking about? Strange.
Exactly. So all it takes is one road win, which happens literally. It's happening as we speak. It happens all the time, and that whole 27-game difference is eradicated. It's pointless. It's already gone. And I think that's, to me, what makes baseball postseason so exciting, but also I think eliminates the idea that they can ever truly be like a Golden State Warriors type game, just because one game in one series is just too small of a sample size.
All right, sometimes I feel like I'm talking baseball with you. It's more toy department for you because you do a lot of politics, you do a lot of real life stuff, you've had a lot of real life situations and written books, and anybody can Google you and see your background as well. I'm going to take this one last question, my parting shot for you. We've had the Kaepernick thing blow up around here this weekend in Goodell, and as a guy who's done sports sports for 25 years. I own a business. I pay taxes. My wife's been a 2-time leukemia battler. My mom's 98 years old and depending on Medicare and Medicaid to keep her alive as well. And, people say to me, stick to sports. I can't think of anything that is a big double middle finger flying F you to me than stick to sports. And then the people yelling stick to sports are the first people that when the Ravens want to sign Colin Kaepernick, it's not about sports at all. Right. And this weekend, we've had real problems here. I mean, you can ask David Simon, going back to working with him 30 years ago at The Sun and writing The Wire, and the shootings we have here, and the gun problems, and the crazy riots we had here, and the crazy baseball owner that decided to lock the gates and play a baseball game and tell the fans they didn't need to come that day. But the whole stick to sports thing really comes to life when Colin Kaepernick comes along, that there is no sticking to sports. There just isn't. To stick to sports is to stick to fantasy land. If you want to go over to the Wonka factory over there, knock yourself out. But we do live in the real world here, and Sports on Earth is a little bit of a reflection on that as well.
Yeah, generally speaking, I find that when someone tells me to stick to sports, what they're really saying is, I disagree politically with what you're saying. That's what they're saying. No one ever says stick to sports when they agree with you. And I think there is this sort of fantasy land, and a part of me understands it. Like, listen, I'll put it this way: I covered the election last year. It was, I will be honest, it was a demoralizing experience. It made me worry. There are certain fundamental things I thought about our country that I think I may have been fooling myself about. And so that was a hard reality to face. And honestly, I really just wanted to go watch a baseball game and just watch a football game.
See, baseball did that to me, right? I mean, I got inside this Angelos thing, which is incredibly Trumpian when it comes down to it. They're giving their international money away, and no one's even asking why. Well, they don't want foreign players on the baseball team, obviously, right? So, you put 2 and 2 together and all this stuff, but it is it's taken some joy for me, out of baseball and the Orioles and how much I love them and growing up and my last name and all. And I wrote all about that 12 years ago. But I can imagine being around these sleazeballs and thinking like freedom and democracy are on the line at the whims of their integrity and character. Boy, that's a high bar, man, right?
Yeah, and so I understand why someone would want to pretend to live in a world where politics doesn't affect sports, but it just does. I mean, every single thing that we do walking around the world is a political act, whether you like it or not. And so, for me to speak specifically to the Kaepernick issue, the idea, never minding just the obvious fact of think of some of the horrible things that people have done that are allowed to play in the NFL, and somehow Colin Kaepernick is the one that they have an issue with. It's kind of its own little notion of hypocrisy. But just the basic fact, I mean, we've never seen this. Like, I wrote a piece about Muhammad Ali when he died last year, and of course it was a tragic thing, and everyone was sad about Muhammad Ali. It was a horrible thing. But I guarantee you, a lot of those people that were saying how wonderful Muhammad Ali was were the exact same people that saying Colin Kaepernick should sit down. They were, and to me, that's the hypocrisy, is the idea. These are the same people that when Muhammad Ali was speaking up back in the day were told him to shut up. Like the idea that listen, obviously it's different circumstances. Muhammad Ali was under a different circumstance than Colin Kaepernick, but the idea that you celebrate, we claim that we want to celebrate people who take a stand and who are able to have a personality and have their personal beliefs, and unless they're different than ours, and then we get mad. And I think that's always kind of an amazing thing, particularly because a lot of times these people are yelling about my freedom of speech, and basically, one of the disturbing developments I've found in both politics and sports in the last year or so is that, you can call out hypocrisy, and it just doesn't seem to matter. They'll just yell louder, and I think there's an element of frustration in that. So yeah, this Kaepernick situation it's discouraging to say the least. And it's I think the way the Ravens have handled the situation. On one hand, they kind of hinted they'd be interested, then they backed off, and it's just I feel like the Ravens, whether they sign him or not, have handled this in a way that's opened them up for a lot of scrutiny, really, no matter what they do.
Well, and that's what happens when your owner shows up at a previously engaged commissioner's event, and you say to the media, you can't ask questions. Only the fans are going to ask questions, and then the fans start asking questions.
Yeah.
I mean, about CTE and about the smartest player in the league, John Urschel, who walked out of here last week, and it does beg far tougher questions that create uncomfortable truths for people, right? And
and I find it insulting, frankly, to assume that every fan's question to you is going to be, hey, how awesome are the Ravens, right? How awesome are those guys? Like fans are smart. Fans have questions just like press do. So the idea that you would just get these happy questions from people, I think is an insult to the people that frankly are your customers and make your business work in the first place.
And I would say this, Bisciotti took the microphone and answered it, and as I pointed out when he was grabbing the microphone, it gets dangerous when he grabs the microphone because he's not Belichickian. He's not statesman-like. He's just honest. and there's not enough of that going around. So, Will, I appreciate that you're always honest. Love your work. We'll be following you down there in beautiful Athens, Georgia, and William F. Leach, and, of course, at Sports on Earth. And I know you do a whole bunch of other writings of great writing out there that we'll be following as well. Be well.
Of course. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Good luck to the Cardinals as well.
They're going to need it.
Life for St. Louis Cardinal fan. Will Leach joining us here, senior writer from Sports on Earth. You can find me out in the Bayou Toyota Audio Vault 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from wherever you happen to be. Morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life. I, much like Mr. Angelos, a very available individual. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Snapchat, Instagram, and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.